History remembers certain empires not just for their power, but for the civilization they created. The Mughal Empire was one such force, an empire that reshaped the political, cultural, and artistic identity of the Indian subcontinent. From the dusty battlefields of Central Asia to the rich plains of Hindustan, the Mughals rose to build one of the most magnificent empires the world has ever seen. This is the story of ambition, conquest, faith, and legacy. This is the story of the Mughal Empire. Setting the stage. In the early 15th century, India was divided into many kingdoms. The Delhi Sultanate was weakening. Regional rulers fought among themselves, and the land was ripe for change. Into this fractured political landscape entered a young warrior with royal blood in his veins, Babur.
Chapter 1. The Rise of Babur, the man who changed the destiny of India. The early life of Babur. Babur was born in 1483 in the Fargana Valley of Central Asia. He was a descendant of two legendary conquerors, Timur or Tamerlane from his father's side, Genghis Khan from his mother's side. From birth, leadership and ambition ran in his blood. At the age of just 12, Babur inherited the small kingdom of Fargana after his father's sudden death. But ruling was never easy. Surrounded by enemies and betrayed by his own nobles, Babur was forced into a life of constant warfare. He lost his throne multiple times, wandering from place to place, a prince without a kingdom. These early struggles shaped his character, resilient, strategic, and fearless. The dream of conquest. After repeated failures in Central Asia, Babur turned his gaze southwards. India, with its wealth, fertile land, and political divisions, appeared vulnerable. The Delhi Sultanate under Ibrahim Lodi was unstable. Nobles were dissatisfied. The army lacked unity. Babur saw opportunity. But this was not a reckless invasion. It was a calculated move. He studied Indian warfare, gathered loyal troops, and introduced gunpowder artillery, a technology still unfamiliar in the Indian subcontinent. This single decision would change the course of Indian history. The First Battle of Panipat, 1526. On April 21, 1526, near the plains of Panipat, two vastly different armies faced each other. On one side stood Ibrahim Lodi, commanding an army of over 1,00,000 soldiers and hundreds of war elephants. On the other stood Babur, with barely 15,000 troops, but armed with discipline, strategy, and cannons. Babur employed innovative military tactics: Tulugma formation, division of troops, use of field artillery, defensive wagon barricades. The result was devastating. Despite being outnumbered, Babur's forces crushed the Delhi Sultanate army. Ibrahim Lodi was killed on the battlefield, and the era of the Delhi Sultanate ended, and the Mughal Empire was born. Consolidation of power. Victory alone was not enough. Babur now faced the challenge of ruling a vast and unfamiliar land. He faced resistance from Rajput rulers, Afghan chiefs, and regional powers. One of his toughest opponents was Rana Sanga of Mewar, a brave Rajput leader who challenged Mughal authority. In the Battle of Khanwa, 1527, Babur once again proved his military brilliance. Despite fierce resistance, his disciplined army prevailed. This victory secured Mughal control over northern India. Babur, the man behind the conqueror. Beyond the battlefield, Babur was a poet, scholar, and lover of nature. He wrote his autobiography, the Baburnama, one of the most honest and vivid memoirs in history. He loved gardens, poetry, music, and art. Unlike many rulers, Babur recorded his failures as honestly as his victories. This makes him not just a conqueror, but a deeply human figure. The final years. Babur ruled India for only 4 years, but his impact was immense. Before his death, in 1330, he ensured a smooth succession for his son Humayun. According to legend, Babur even prayed to take on his son's illness upon himself. a sacrifice that symbolizes his deep love and devotion. Soon after, Babur passed away, but the empire he founded was only beginning.
Chapter 2. The Struggle. Humayun. Introduction. A king without a kingdom. Every empire has a moment of testing. For the Mughal Empire, that test came not through invasion, but through weakness from within. After the death of Babur, the vast empire he had carved out stood at a crossroads. Its fate now rested on the shoulders of a young and inexperienced ruler, Humayun, the eldest son of Babur. Unlike his father, Humayun inherited not a united kingdom, but a fragile empire surrounded by enemies, betrayal, and ambition. The inheritance of a fragile throne. Humayun ascended the throne in 1530 at just 22 years of age. Though intelligent and well-educated, he lacked the political sharpness and military decisiveness that had defined Babur. Instead of strengthening his authority, Humayun made a fatal mistake. He divided his empire among his brothers, hoping to maintain peace. This decision weakened central control and planted the seeds of rebellion. While Babur ruled with iron discipline, Humayun ruled with idealism, and the world around him was ruthless. The rise of Sher Shah Suri. As Humayun struggled with internal conflicts, a powerful Afghan leader was rising in eastern India, Sher Shah Suri. Originally named Farid Khan, Sher Shah was brilliant, ambitious, and deeply strategic. He understood warfare, administration, and the psychology of power. While Humayun spent time in luxury and spiritual pursuits, Sher Shah built an efficient army and a strong administrative system. Their conflict was inevitable. The battles that changed everything. In 1539, Humayun faced Sher Shah at the Battle of Chausa. Despite having superior numbers, Humayun was defeated due to poor leadership and overconfidence. The following year, in 1540, the final blow came at the Battle of Kannauj. Sher Shah crushed the Mughal forces. Humayun was forced to flee, stripped of his throne, his army, and his pride. The mighty Mughal Empire collapsed almost overnight. Years of exile and struggle. For the next 15 years, Humayun lived the life of a wanderer. He wandered through deserts, crossed mountains, and sought refuge in foreign lands. At one point, he was so desperate that he had to flee to Persia, seeking help from the Safavid ruler, Shah Tahmasp. This period of exile transformed Humayun. He studied Persian culture, administration, and art, influences that would later shape Mughal culture. With Persian support, he gathered an army to reclaim his lost empire. The return of a king. In 1555, after years of exile, Humayun returned to India. The Sur Empire had weakened after Sher Shah Suri's death, torn apart by internal conflicts. Seizing this opportunity, Humayun defeated the Sur forces and reclaimed Delhi. At last, the Mughal throne was his again. It seemed as if destiny had finally smiled upon him. A tragic end. But fate had other plans. Just months after regaining his empire, Humayun met a tragic end. One evening, while descending the steps of his library, he slipped, fell, and suffered a fatal injury. The emperor who survived countless battles died in an accident, a tragic twist of fate. Legacy of Humayun. Though his reign was troubled, Humayun's legacy was profound. He preserved the Mughal line, introduced Persian art and culture to India, laid the foundation for the Golden Age under his son Akbar. Without Humayun's survival and return, there would have been no Akbar, no Mughal Golden Age. Chapter 3. The Golden Age. Akbar. Introduction. The boy who became an emperor. History has seen many kings, but only a few who became legends. When Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar ascended the Mughal throne in 1556, he was just 13 years old, a boy in an empire surrounded by enemies. The Mughal Empire, still fragile after the struggles of Babur and Humayun, stood on the edge of collapse. Yet, from this moment of uncertainty emerged one of the greatest rulers the world has ever known. This is the story of Akbar the Great, the emperor who transformed a fragile kingdom into a golden empire. Chapter 1. A Boy King and His Guardian. At the time of his coronation, Akbar was too young to rule independently. Power lay in the hands of his regent and mentor, Bairam Khan, a seasoned general and strategist. Bairam Khan became the backbone of the empire, guiding the young emperor through turbulent times. But danger loomed. The Mughal throne was challenged by Hemu, a powerful Hindu general who had captured Delhi and declared himself ruler. The fate of the Mughal Empire hung in the balance. Chapter 2. The Second Battle of Panipat, 1556. The decisive moment came at the Second Battle of Panipat. On one side stood Hemu, commanding a vast army and war elephants. On the other stood the teenage Emperor Akbar, guided by Bairam Khan. The battle was fierce. At a critical moment, an arrow struck Hemu in the eye, throwing his army into chaos. The Mughal forces seized the opportunity and claimed victory. This single battle secured Akbar's throne and restored Mughal dominance over North India. Chapter 3. Consolidation and Expansion. With his authority established, Akbar began expanding the empire. He conquered Malwa, Gujarat, Bengal, Rajputana. But unlike previous rulers, Akbar did not rule through fear. He adopted a policy of conciliation rather than destruction. Rajput rulers were allowed to retain their kingdoms, marry into the Mughal family, and serve as high-ranking nobles. This transformed former enemies into loyal allies. Chapter 4. The Mansabdari System, Foundation of Empire. One of Akbar's greatest administrative innovations was the Mansabdari system. Under this system, every noble was assigned a rank, mansab. Rank determined military and administrative duties. Salaries were paid through land revenue assignments, jagirs. This created a centralized merit-based administration that ensured loyalty and efficiency. The Mansabdari system became the backbone of Mughal governance for generations. Chapter 5. Fatehpur Sikri, a City of Dreams. To celebrate his victories and spiritual beliefs, Akbar built a magnificent new capital, Fatehpur Sikri. Constructed entirely of red sandstone, it symbolized the glory of the Mughal Empire. Within its walls stood the Buland Darwaza, Jama Masjid, Panch Mahal, Diwan-e Khas. Fatehpur Sikri became a center of administration, culture and learning. Though later abandoned due to water shortages, it remains a monument to Akbar's vision. Chapter 6. Religious Tolerance and Deen-e-Ilahi. One of Akbar's most revolutionary ideas was Sulh-e-Kul, universal tolerance. He invited scholars of all religions, Hinduism, Islam, Jainism, Christianity, and Zoroastrianism to debate freely in his court. From these discussions emerged Deen-e-Ilahi, a spiritual philosophy emphasizing moral living, harmony, and loyalty. Though it never became a mass religion, it reflected Akbar's deep commitment to unity and peace. Chapter 7. Culture, Art, and Administration. Akbar's reign marked a golden age of culture. Persian and Indian art merged into a unique Mughal style. Miniature paintings flourished, literature, architecture, and music thrived. Administratively, Akbar established efficient revenue systems, standardized weights and measures, fair taxation based on crop assessment. His governance was both humane and effective. Chapter 8. The Legacy of Akbar. When Akbar died in 1605, he left behind more than an empire. He left a legacy of religious tolerance, political unity, cultural synthesis. Under his rule, the Mughal Empire became one of the most powerful and prosperous states in the world. Conclusion: the Golden Age of the Mughals.
Akbar was not just a conqueror, he was a visionary. He proved that an empire could be built not just on swords, but on justice, wisdom, and inclusivity. The golden age of the Mughal Empire began with Akbar, and his legacy continues to shape the history of India.
Chapter 4. The Artistic Age, Jahangir and Noor Jahan. Introduction. An era of refinement. After the powerful reign of Akbar, the Mughal Empire entered a new phase, not one of conquest, but of culture, elegance, and refinement. This was the age of Jahangir, the emperor who transformed the Mughal court into a center of art, beauty, and intellectual expression. If Akbar built the foundations of the empire, Jahangir gave it a soul. The rise of Jahangir. In 1605, Prince Salim ascended the throne, taking the name Nuruddin Muhammad Jahangir, meaning World Caesar. From a young age, Jahangir had lived a life of luxury and education. Unlike his father Akbar, he was not a warrior king, but a connoisseur of art, beauty, and nature. His reign marked a shift from conquest to culture, from battlefield to atelier, from empire building to artistic refinement. Yet this refinement came with complexity. Jahangir, the emperor of justice and art. Jahangir was deeply fascinated by justice. He introduced the famous chain of justice, a golden chain hung outside his palace which any citizen could pull to seek direct justice from the emperor. He took pride in being a fair ruler, often recording court events and judgments in his memoirs, the Tuzuk-i-Jahangiri. At the same time, Jahangir was a man of contradictions. He was a patron of art and culture, yet struggled with personal indulgences. He was compassionate towards animals and artists, yet ruthless towards rebellion. Noor Jahan, the most powerful woman of the Mughal Empire. One cannot speak of Jahangir without speaking of Noor Jahan. Born Meherun-Nisa, she rose from noble origins to become the most influential woman in Mughal history. After marrying Jahangir, she became his closest advisor, confidant, and political partner. Noor Jahan was no ordinary queen. She issued royal orders in her own name, had coins minted bearing her name, appointed officials and influenced state policy. In many ways, she ruled alongside and sometimes beyond the emperor himself. The zenith of Mughal art. Under Jahangir, Mughal painting reached its artistic peak. Court artists created lifelike portraits, detailed nature studies, and elaborate royal scenes. Jahangir himself was a keen observer of nature and demanded scientific accuracy in paintings of animals, birds, and plants. Miniature paintings from this era are considered masterpieces of world art. This was the golden age of Mughal painting. Cultural refinement and tolerance. Jahangir continued Akbar's policy of religious tolerance. He supported scholars of different faiths, maintained friendly relations with Hindu nobles, and patronized learning across cultures. Persian art blended seamlessly with Indian traditions, creating a uniquely Mughal cultural identity. Music, poetry, and architecture flourished under royal patronage. The shadows behind the glory. Despite the splendor, Jahangir's reign was not without flaws. He struggled with alcoholism and ill health. Court politics grew intense. Power struggles among nobles increased. Yet, even in decline, the administrative structure of the empire remained strong, thanks to systems built during earlier reigns. The transition to Shah Jahan. As Jahangir's health failed, the empire prepared for another transition. The man who would soon ascend the throne, Prince Khurram, later known as Shah Jahan, was already making his mark. With him would come an era defined not just by power but by architectural magnificence. Conclusion. A golden interlude. The reign of Jahangir stands as a bridge between two giants, Akbar and Shah Jahan. It was an era of refinement, art, and cultural brilliance. While not known for vast conquests, Jahangir's legacy lies in his patronage of beauty, justice, and culture. His reign transformed the Mughal court into a center of artistic excellence, leaving a legacy that still echoes through the halls of history.
Chapter 5. The Marble Emperor, Shah Jahan. Introduction. The Emperor of Beauty. History remembers conquerors for their victories, but some rulers are remembered for what they created. Among all Mughal emperors, Shah Jahan stands apart, not as a warrior king, but as a visionary builder, a ruler whose legacy was carved not in blood, but in marble, poetry, and eternal love. Under his reign, the Mughal Empire reached the height of its cultural and architectural glory. This was the age of elegance, the age of beauty, the age of the Marble Emperor. The rise of Shah Jahan. Born as Prince Khurram, the son of Emperor Jahangir, Shah Jahan grew up in the heart of imperial luxury. From a young age, he was trained in warfare, administration, poetry, and architecture. He was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply artistic. When Jahangir passed away in 1627, a brutal struggle for succession followed. Through political skill and military precision, Prince Khurram emerged victorious. Crowned as Shah Jahan, he inherited not just an empire, but a vision. The golden age of Mughal architecture. Shah Jahan believed that architecture was the highest expression of power and beauty. Under his reign, the Mughal Empire entered its golden age of architecture. He transformed cities into masterpieces and stone into poetry. The Red Fort, seat of imperial power. The Red Fort of Delhi became the symbolic heart of the empire. Built of red sandstone and marble, it housed the Diwan-e-Am, Hall of Public Audience, the Diwan-e-Khas, Hall of Private Audience, royal palaces, gardens, and mosques. Every structure reflected balance, symmetry, and grandeur. This was not just a palace, it was a statement of imperial authority. The Taj Mahal, a monument of love. But Shah Jahan's greatest creation was not built for power, it was built for love. In 1631, his beloved wife Mumtaz Mahal died while giving birth to their 14th child. Devastated, Shah Jahan vowed to create a monument that would immortalize her memory. What followed was one of the greatest architectural achievements in human history. A symbol of eternal love. Construction of the Taj Mahal took over 22 years and involved more than 20,000 artisans from across Asia. White marble was brought from Makrana. Precious stones were inlaid using the art of pietra dura. The structure was designed with perfect symmetry. The central dome, reflecting pools, calligraphy from the Quran, gardens symbolizing paradise. The Taj Mahal changes color with the sun, soft pink at dawn, brilliant white at noon, and golden at dusk. It is not just a building, it is an emotion carved in stone. Architectural perfection. Shah Jahan's era perfected Mughal architecture. Balance and symmetry, geometric precision, integration of Persian, Islamic, and Indian styles. Other masterpieces from his reign include Jama Masjid, Delhi, Moti Masjid, Shalimar Gardens. His reign turned architecture into poetry. The War of Succession. But beauty came at a cost. Shah Jahan's later years were marked by internal conflict. His sons, Dara Shikoh, Aurangzeb, Shah Shuja, and Murad fought a brutal war for the throne. The conflict shattered the empire's stability. In the end, Aurangzeb emerged victorious. He imprisoned his own father, Shah Jahan, in the Agra fort. From a window, the old emperor could see the Taj Mahal, the tomb of his beloved wife, every single day. The tragic end. Shah Jahan spent the last years of his life confined, gazing at the monument of his love. In 1666, he passed away. He was laid to rest beside Mumtaz Mahal, united with her once more in death. Their tomb remains one of the most powerful symbols of love ever created. Legacy of the Marble Emperor. Shah Jahan left behind more than buildings. He left a timeless architectural legacy, a vision of artistic excellence, a symbol of love that transcends centuries. The Taj Mahal stands today as a reminder that even in an age of war and power, beauty can endure. The Mughal Empire reached its artistic peak under Shah Jahan. What began with conquest ended in creation, and though empires fade, great art lives on forever.
Chapter 6. The Last Great Emperor, Aurangzeb Alamgir. Introduction. The Shadow of Greatness. Every great empire reaches a moment where its power peaks, and from that peak, decline quietly begins. For the Mughal Empire, that turning point came under a ruler both brilliant and controversial, Aurangzeb Alamgir. To some, he was the most powerful emperor India had ever seen. To others, he was the man who unknowingly weakened the foundations of a mighty empire. This is the story of ambition, faith, conquest, and consequence. This is the story of Aurangzeb. Chapter 1. The Path to the Throne. Aurangzeb was born in 1618, the third son of Emperor Shah Jahan. Unlike his elder brothers, he was not raised in luxury or art. He was disciplined, deeply religious, and intensely ambitious. As a young prince, he proved himself on the battlefield, crushing rebellions, governing provinces, and expanding Mughal control in the Deccan. When Shah Jahan fell ill, a brutal war of succession erupted among his sons. Aurangzeb defeated his brothers one by one. Dara Shikoh was captured and executed. Shah Shuja was defeated and fled. Murad was imprisoned and later killed. In 1658, Aurangzeb crowned himself emperor. But the price of power was blood. Chapter 2. The Rise of a Strict Ruler. Unlike his predecessors, Aurangzeb rejected luxury. He lived simply, dressed modestly, and followed strict religious discipline. Music, painting, and royal extravagance were discouraged. Aurangzeb believed that an emperor's duty was not pleasure, but obedience to divine law. He aimed to rule as a moral guardian rather than a patron of art. This marked a sharp shift from the tolerant and artistic court of Akbar and Shah Jahan. Chapter 3. The Deccan Campaigns. Aurangzeb's greatest ambition was to bring the entire Indian subcontinent under Mughal control. His focus turned south to the Deccan Plateau. For over 25 years, Aurangzeb personally led military campaigns against the Deccan Sultanates and the rising Maratha power under Shivaji and his successors. These wars were long, expensive, and exhausting. Although Aurangzeb eventually annexed vast territories, the cost was enormous. The treasury was drained, the army was overstretched, administration weakened. Victory came, but at a terrible price. Chapter 4. Religious Policies and Their Impact. Aurangzeb believed in ruling according to strict Islamic principles. He reversed many of Akbar's policies, reimposed jizya tax on non-Muslims, destroyed or repurposed some temples, reduced royal patronage of arts and music. These actions alienated many communities and weakened the sense of unity that once held the empire together. While some saw him as a devout ruler, others saw his reign as divisive. Chapter 5. The Paradox of Power. At its height, the Mughal Empire under Aurangzeb was the largest territorial state in Indian history. Yet it was also at its weakest internally. The empire had become too vast to govern effectively. Local revolts grew frequent. The Marathas, Sikhs, and regional powers gained strength. Aurangzeb ruled for nearly 50 years, but much of that time was spent fighting rebellions. He conquered much but consolidated little. Chapter 6: The Fall Begins. By the time Aurangzeb died in 1707, the empire was exhausted. His successors were weak. The treasury was empty. Provincial governors declared independence. Within decades, the Mughal Empire was reduced to a shadow of its former self. What followed was the rise of regional powers and eventually colonial domination. Conclusion: the legacy of a complex emperor. Aurangzeb remains one of the most debated figures in Indian history. To some, he was a devout ruler who upheld discipline and order. To others, he was the architect of the empire's decline. What is undeniable is this: under Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire reached its greatest territorial extent and also began its irreversible decline. His reign stands as a powerful reminder that empires are not sustained by conquest alone, but by unity, tolerance, and wise governance.
Chapter 7: The Collapse, Fall of the Mughal Empire. Introduction: The end of an era. Every empire that rises must one day fall. After centuries of glory, power, and cultural brilliance, the Mughal Empire, once the greatest force in the Indian subcontinent, began a slow and painful descent. What followed was not a sudden collapse, but a long, tragic unraveling. This is the story of decline, of lost authority, of shattered unity, and of an empire that faded into history. Chapter 1: The Era of Weak Emperors. After the death of Aurangzeb in 1707, the Mughal Empire stood vast but hollow. Aurangzeb had expanded the empire to its greatest territorial extent, but he left behind an exhausted treasury, an overextended army, and deep internal divisions. What followed was a tragic pattern. In less than 50 years, the Mughal throne witnessed more than 15 emperors. Most were weak, many were manipulated. Some ruled for only months. The throne became a prize in court conspiracies rather than a seat of real power. Imperial authority trembled and the empire began to fracture from within. Chapter 2: The Shadow of Weakness. As central power weakened, provincial governors began acting independently. Nawabs in Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad ruled like kings in all but name. Revenue no longer reached Delhi. The Mughal army, once feared, was unpaid and undisciplined. Corruption spread through administration. Loyalty was replaced by ambition. The Mughal emperor was still called the Badshah of Hindustan, but his authority barely extended beyond the walls of Delhi. Chapter 3: Nadir Shah's Devastation, 1739. The greatest blow came not from within, but from outside. In 1739, Nadir Shah of Persia invaded India. The Mughal army, weakened and disorganized, could not resist him. At the Battle of Karnal, the Mughal forces were decisively defeated. Nadir Shah marched into Delhi, unleashing one of the most brutal massacres in Indian history. For days, the city burned. Thousands were killed. The treasury was emptied. He carried away unimaginable wealth, including the legendary peacock throne and the Kohinoor diamond. This single invasion shattered the prestige of the Mughal Empire beyond repair. Chapter 4: The Afghan Invasions. As Mughal power crumbled, another threat emerged from the northwest. Ahmad Shah Durrani, founder of the Afghan Durrani Empire, invaded India multiple times. Between 1748 and 1767, he launched repeated attacks, devastating Punjab and northern India. The most significant was the Third Battle of Panipat, 1761, a massive and brutal conflict between the Afghans and the Maratha Confederacy. Though the Marathas were defeated, India was left exhausted and fractured. The Mughal emperor, reduced to a figurehead, could do nothing. Chapter 5: The Rise of the East India Company. As Indian powers weakened each other, a new force quietly rose in the shadows. The East India Company, originally a trading corporation, began to exploit the chaos. With superior organization, financial backing, and military tactics, the company expanded its influence. Key moments: Battle of Plassey, 1757. Battle of Buxar, 1764. These victories turned a trading company into the real ruler of India. The Mughal emperor became nothing more than a symbolic figure living on a pension. Chapter 6. The Last Emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar. By the mid-19th century, the Mughal Empire was a shadow of its former self. Bahadur Shah Zafar, a poet and mystic, became the last Mughal emperor. He had no real power, only a title and a palace. In 1858, during the Great Indian Rebellion, rebels declared him the symbolic leader of the uprising. But the revolt failed. The British crushed the rebellion and exiled Bahadur Shah Zafar to Rangoon, Myanmar. With his exile in 1858, the Mughal Empire officially came to an end. Epilogue: the end of an era. The Mughal Empire lasted over 3 centuries. It rose through ambition, flourished through vision, and fell through division. From Babur's conquest to Aurangzeb's expansion, from the grandeur of the Taj Mahal to the quiet exile of its last emperor, the Mughal story is one of glory and tragedy. Though the empire fell, its legacy remains alive in India's culture, language, architecture, and soul. The Mughal Empire may have ended in 1857, but its shadow still shapes history.
Chapter 8. The Legacy, the Enduring Shadow of the Mughal Empire. Introduction. When empires fade, legacies remain. Empires rise, empires fall. But only a few leave behind a legacy so deep that centuries later, their influence still shapes language, culture, art, and identity. The Mughal Empire may have collapsed politically in the 19th century, but its legacy continues to live in stone, in words, in flavors, and in the very soul of the Indian subcontinent. This is the story of what the Mughals left behind, a legacy that outlived kings, armies, and time itself. 1. Architectural legacy, stone that speaks. Perhaps the most visible legacy of the Mughals is their architecture. From the red sandstone forts of Agra and Delhi to the white marble perfection of the Taj Mahal, Mughal architecture transformed the landscape of India. They perfected symmetry and geometric precision, grand domes and soaring minarets, intricate inlay work using precious stones, gardens based on Persian charbagh design, structures like Taj Mahal, Red Fort, Jama Masjid, Humayun's tomb stand today not just as monuments but as expressions of emotion, power, and philosophy. These buildings were not just constructed, they were composed like poetry in stone. 2. Language and literature. The rise of Urdu. The Mughal era witnessed the birth of a new cultural language, Urdu, a fusion of Persian, Arabic, Turkish, and local Indian dialects. Urdu became the language of poetry, court culture, and refined expression. Under Mughal patronage, poetry flourished. Poets like Mir Taqi Mir and Mirza Ghalib later shaped its soul. The Mughal courts became centers of literature, calligraphy, and intellectual exchange. Even today, Urdu remains one of the most expressive languages in the world. 3. Cuisine. Flavors of an empire. The Mughal kitchen transformed Indian food forever. Their chefs blended Central Asian, Persian, and Indian traditions to create a royal cuisine rich in aroma and flavor. Signature contributions include biryani, korma, kebabs, nihari, pulao. Cooking became an art form, slow-cooked, layered, and aromatic. Even today, Mughlai cuisine remains synonymous with luxury and indulgence. 4. Art, painting, and aesthetics. The Mughal rulers were great patrons of art. Miniature painting reached its golden age under the Mughals, combining Persian techniques with Indian realism. Paintings depicted court life, royal hunts, festivals, portraits of emperors. Art was not decoration, it was a visual record of history. Jewelry design, textiles, and calligraphy also flourished, influencing Indian aesthetics for centuries. 5. Administration and governance. The Mughal administrative system laid foundations for modern governance.
Key features included a centralized bureaucracy, revenue systems based on land measurement, written records and accountability, professional military administration. Many of these systems were later adopted by the British colonial administration. Even modern Indian bureaucracy carries traces of Mughal administrative principles. 6. Religious and cultural synthesis. Perhaps the greatest legacy of the Mughals was cultural synthesis. Despite religious differences, Mughal India fostered coexistence. Hindu, Muslim, Jain, and Sikh traditions influenced each other. This blend created a shared cultural identity seen in art, language, music, and everyday life. The Mughal period proved that diversity could be a strength rather than a weakness. Conclusion: a legacy that endures. Empires rise and fall, but legacies endure. The Mughal Empire may have vanished from political power, but its influence remains deeply woven into the fabric of South Asia. From monuments that touch the sky to verses that touch the heart. From cuisine that delights the senses to ideas that shaped civilization. The Mughals left behind more than ruins. They left behind a civilization. And that legacy continues to live on.
Chapter 9. The End of a Mughal Empire. Introduction. The End of an Era. Every great civilization eventually reaches a moment when history turns the page. The Mughal Empire, once the most powerful empire in the world, did not fall in a single battle, nor did it vanish overnight. It faded slowly, weakened by time, conflict, and change. Yet even in its fall, the Mughal Empire left behind something extraordinary, a legacy that still defines the soul of the Indian subcontinent. This is the story of that legacy. The fall was not sudden, it was slow. The decline of the Mughal Empire did not come from one enemy or one mistake. It was the result of many forces acting together. After Aurangzeb's death, the empire suffered from weak and ineffective rulers. Endless succession struggles, economic exhaustion, repeated invasions, loss of military discipline. The central authority weakened while regional governors became increasingly independent. What once was a unified empire slowly fragmented into competing powers. The rise of new powers. As Mughal authority weakened, new forces rose across the subcontinent. The Marathas expanded rapidly across central and western India. The Sikhs established power in Punjab. Regional kingdoms asserted independence. European trading companies began interfering in Indian politics. The Mughal emperor, once the most powerful ruler in Asia, became a symbolic figure with little real authority. The final blow: British colonial dominance. By the 18th century, the British East India Company had transformed from traders into rulers. Through diplomacy, deception, and military force, the company gained control over vast territories. After the revolt of 1857, the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was deposed and exiled. With his fall, the Mughal Empire officially ended. An era that had lasted more than 3 centuries came to a quiet, tragic close. The lasting legacy of the Mughals. Yet, despite political collapse, the Mughal legacy endured. It lives on in architecture, Taj Mahal, Red Fort, Jama Masjid; language, the development of Urdu and Persian-influenced Hindi; art and culture, painting, music, poetry; governance, administrative systems that shaped modern India. The Mughal period defined the cultural foundation of the subcontinent. Their influence can still be felt in everyday life, in food, clothing, architecture, and traditions. The human story behind the empire. Beyond wars and palaces, the Mughal story is a human one. It is a story of ambition and ambition's cost, of love and loss, of power, faith, and identity. From Babur's ambition to Aurangzeb's iron rule, the Mughal story mirrors the rise and fall of human ambition itself. Final reflection. The Mughal Empire may have fallen, but it was never forgotten.
Its monuments still stand, its art still inspires, its history still shapes who we are. Empires may collapse, but legacies endure, and the legacy of the Mughals lives on, carved in stone, written in history, and remembered by the world.